Let me start with something simple and honest. You want to begin something big. Maybe it's learning English seriously. Maybe it's changing your career. Maybe it's building a life that looks very different from the one you have now. And just when you feel that spark of excitement, a quiet voice appears in your head. It doesn't scream. It whispers, "People like me don't do things like that." Not because you're lazy. Not because you lack ambition. But because you're standing inside something I call the identity comfort zone. It's the invisible box built from your past, your family, your environment, and the stories you've repeated about yourself. I'm not good at languages. I'm not from a big city. I don't have connections. These sentences feel logical. But most of the time, they are just familiar. And we often confuse familiar with possible. Here's the truth. Nothing is impossible is not a motivational slogan. It's a process. Something feels impossible because it's unfamiliar. When it's unfamiliar, it becomes uncomfortable. When it's uncomfortable, most people stop. But if you stay, if you practice, if you repeat, what was uncomfortable slowly becomes normal. And what was once normal becomes small. The path usually looks like this. Impossible becomes unfamiliar. Unfamiliar becomes uncomfortable. Uncomfortable becomes practice. Practice becomes normal. This is the story of Liam. But not just a story about going from security guard to software engineer. That's the headline. The real story is about identity shift. About becoming the kind of person who does things you once believed were not for people like you. It's about grit, the quiet decision to continue when nobody is clapping. It's about deliberate practice, breaking a skill into small pieces and improving one part at a time. And it's about long-term thinking, choosing growth today, even when results are invisible. This video is not here to make you emotional for a few minutes and then forget everything tomorrow. It's here to give you something practical. How to think when you don't have money. How to grow when you don't have the right environment. How to learn a skill from zero. How to survive the lonely phase when no one understands what you're building. And most importantly, how to turn doubt into fuel instead of letting it become a wall. Because impossible is usually just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar is temporary if you stay long enough. Everything started with a boy who watched life from the outside. Everything started with a boy who watched life from the outside. Liam was 17 when he first stood in front of that tall glass building. He wasn't inside. He wasn't wearing a badge. He wasn't carrying a laptop. He was wearing a dull brown security uniform and holding a wooden stick, standing near the gate from 9 at night until sunrise. Inside the building, the lights stayed on late. Through the glass, he could see young engineers typing quickly, laughing over coffee, discussing ideas in rooms filled with screens and whiteboards. Outside, he stood still in the cold air, invisible. But here's what most people misunderstand. He wasn't jealous. He didn't hate them. He didn't feel angry at the world. What he felt was something quieter and more dangerous: curiosity. He kept asking himself, how did they get there? What do they know that I don't? It wasn't bitterness. It was hunger. A quiet hunger that didn't shout, but refused to disappear. He didn't come from a rich family. There was no computer at home. No Wi-Fi. No mentor. College wasn't even a clear option. But one day, months before he took the security job, he had walked into a small internet cafe and watched someone write lines of code. Black screen. Colored text. Simple commands turning into something alive. In that moment, something shifted. He realized that skills are built, not born. Those engineers weren't magical. They had learned something. And if something can be learned, it can be practiced. So while he guarded the building at night, he studied during his breaks. He had a cheap second-hand phone. The battery barely survived 2 hours, but it could open YouTube. He would sit in the parking lot corner searching. What is coding? How to become a software engineer? Sometimes the videos buffered more than they played. Sometimes he understood only 10% of the English. But he kept watching. This is something important. When you repeatedly expose yourself to a new environment, your brain slowly stops seeing it as impossible. Psychologists call it exposure effect. The more you see something, the more normal it feels. At first, software engineering looked like a distant planet. After weeks of watching tutorials and reading simple PDFs, it began to feel like a difficult city, not another galaxy. And cities can be reached. He didn't wait for perfect conditions. He didn't say, "I'll start when I have a laptop." He started with what he had. 10 minutes during a break. 15 minutes before sleeping. 20 minutes in the morning. Microlearning. Small pieces. Over and over. Most people wait for motivation or perfect timing. He built habit instead. The nights were long. Sometimes the wind was cold. Sometimes he felt invisible. Engineers walked past him without noticing. He wasn't part of their conversations. He wasn't invited inside. But something powerful was happening. He was training in isolation. And this is the part people don't see. Every skill is built alone first. Every transformation begins in private. The lonely phase is not a sign you are behind. It is a sign you are early. When you start something new, you will often feel like an outsider. You don't speak the language fluently. You don't understand the jokes. You don't feel confident. That doesn't mean you don't belong. It means you haven't stayed long enough yet. Liam understood something without reading it in a book. Nothing is impossible. But everything is lonely before it's visible. Before success becomes public, effort is private. Before people congratulate you, they ignore you. Every night, he stood outside that building. But mentally, he had already stepped inside. He was no longer just guarding the future. He was preparing for it. And then came the walls. The failures. The silence. The first real wall came quietly. After months of watching tutorials and reading PDFs, Liam decided to build something on his own. A simple website. Just HTML and CSS. Nothing fancy. But to him, it felt like building a bridge from his world into theirs. For 2 weeks, after every night shift, he sat on his small bed with borrowed notes and typed line after line of code. He barely slept. His eyes burned. But he felt alive. Then one night, he clicked run. White screen. Error. He stared at it, confused. He refreshed. Same result. He checked the files. Nothing. 2 weeks of work had collapsed because of one missing line. One small mistake. It felt unfair. It felt humiliating. He sat there in silence, the room dark, the fan spinning slowly above him. For a moment, he believed the voice in his head. Maybe this isn't for you. This is where most people stop. Not because they are weak, but because the first real failure feels like proof. Proof that you were dreaming too big. But failure is not proof. It's information. There is a difference between motivation and grit. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. Grit is different. Grit is passion plus consistency over time. It's not explosive energy. It's staying power. It's reopening the laptop the next day, even when yesterday hurt. Liam didn't make a speech. He didn't post about perseverance. He simply reopened the code and searched for the error line by line. That's deliberate practice. Instead of starting over blindly, he broke the problem into pieces. He checked each block, each function, each tag. He didn't just try harder. He tried smarter. Deliberate practice means isolating weaknesses and fixing them slowly. It means improving one small section instead of hoping for a miracle. The second version of the website worked. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't impressive. But it loaded. And that loading page meant something powerful. Progress is possible. Encouraged, he applied for jobs. More than 80 applications. Some companies never replied. Some sent automated rejection emails. Some said he lacked formal education. In total, 79 rejections. Each one small. Each one heavy. Every rejection feels personal, even when it isn't. But here's something important. Rejection doesn't measure your worth. It measures fit. And often, it measures timing. Grit means continuing when external validation is missing. Finally, one small company replied. Let's talk. He didn't own a formal shirt. He showed up in his security guard uniform, straight from a night shift. When the interviewer asked, "Tell me about yourself," he didn't pretend. He told the truth. He was a guard who studied coding during breaks because he refused to stay outside forever. He was offered an unpaid internship. Not glamorous, not secure, but it was a door. Inside the office, a new wall appeared. Insecurity. His colleagues had degrees. Fluent English. Certificates. He had YouTube videos and exhaustion. During meetings, he nodded quietly, then Googled unfamiliar terms during lunch breaks. When someone casually asked, "Which college did you attend?" he felt the old outsider feeling rise again. This is something called imposter syndrome. When you level up, your identity lags behind. You enter a new room, but your mind still lives in the old one. You feel like a fraud, even if you earned your place. And here is the truth. That feeling is normal. It is not a signal to leave. It is a signal that you are growing. Confidence does not arrive before action. You build confidence by surviving discomfort. Every meeting he survived without quitting added one small brick. Every bug he fixed added another. Every awkward conversation he pushed through strengthened him. 3 months into the internship, he was given a difficult bug to solve. Others had tried. It failed. He didn't feel ready. He never felt ready. But he stayed late. Broke the problem into parts. Tested line by line. 2 days later, he solved it. Quietly. No dramatic applause. Just a nod from his manager. But that nod meant something deeper than praise. It meant he could stay. The world may open the door, but you must grow fast enough to stay. Success didn't change his life overnight. It changed his identity slowly. The internship was unpaid. That's important, because when people hear success stories, they often imagine a dramatic turning point with instant reward. That's not what happened. Liam still worked night shifts as a guard while spending his days inside the office as an intern. He was exhausted. He was behind on sleep. He was learning faster than he ever had before. And no one was paying him for it. But something subtle had changed. He no longer saw himself as a guard trying to code. He began to see himself as a developer in training who temporarily works as a guard. That shift sounds small, but it changes everything. Identity-based change is not about saying, "I want success." It's about saying, "I am becoming the kind of person who does this every day." When identity changes, behavior follows. He stopped studying only when he felt inspired. He studied because that's what developers do. He stopped comparing himself to colleagues. He focused on compounding skill. One small improvement each week. One new concept understood. One bug fixed. Long-term compounding is simple math. Skill plus time becomes exponential growth. At first, progress feels invisible. But over months, it accelerates quietly. Then came the breakthrough moment. The difficult bug. The one others avoided. He didn't announce that he would fix it. He just stayed. He read documentation carefully. Tested edge cases. Broke the code into blocks. That's deliberate practice again. Instead of trying to look impressive, he tried to understand deeply. After 2 long days, the bug was gone. The product worked smoothly. His manager didn't celebrate loudly. He simply forwarded the fix to the CTO with a short message. Resolved. That was the first time Liam felt something shift internally. Not pride. Ownership. He wasn't surviving anymore. He was contributing. A few weeks later, his internship became a paid role. The first salary wasn't large. But when he saw the number in his bank account, he didn't see money. He saw proof. Proof that delayed gratification works. For months, he had chosen discomfort over comfort. Chosen learning over sleep. Chosen growth over excuses. And now the reward arrived, not suddenly, but steadily. With that first salary, he didn't buy luxury items. He bought a new fan for the house. A proper mattress for his father's aching back. Groceries without counting coins. When he handed the envelope to his father, there was no big speech. His father held it quietly and said, "Maybe I was just too tired to believe." That sentence stayed with him. It wasn't doubt. It was fatigue. Sometimes people don't discourage you because they lack faith in you. They lack energy. They've lived too long in survival mode to imagine ownership. Liam didn't argue with the past. He outgrew it. Here's the insight most people miss. Impossible doesn't disappear. You outgrow it. The wall doesn't shrink. You expand. What once felt unreachable becomes routine. What once scared you becomes standard. And the quiet success principle is real. Struggle is silent. Results are loud. While you are learning, failing, practicing, nobody notices. When success appears, people say, "You're lucky." They don't see the silent years. But that silence is where identity is rebuilt. Delayed gratification is not glamorous. It's uncomfortable. It means saying no to short-term relief, so you can build long-term strength. It means choosing the long game when quick rewards are tempting. That's how survival turns into ownership. Liam didn't wake up one morning confident. He built confidence brick by brick. Not by repeating, "I can do it," but by proving to himself again and again that he could survive difficulty. And this story is not about coding. It's about you. Let's bring this home in a way that's honest. Nothing is impossible, but it is uncomfortable. When people say something is impossible, it's rarely about ability. Most of the time, it's about fear. Fear of embarrassment. Fear of looking stupid in front of others. Fear of being the beginner in a room full of experts. Fear of being behind. Fear of starting small when you secretly want to start big. Liam didn't fail because he lacked intelligence. He almost failed because he felt small. Because he stood outside the building and thought, "Do I really belong in there?" The biggest battle was not technical. It was psychological. And that's true for most of us. You don't avoid dreams because they are impossible. You avoid them because they make you uncomfortable. And discomfort feels dangerous, even when it isn't. So what do you actually do? Let's make it simple. 3 rules. First, show up daily even when no one sees you. The world celebrates results, but growth happens in private. The nights you study, the mornings you practice, the small efforts that feel invisible. That's where identity changes. Second, improve just 1% each week. Not overnight transformation. Not dramatic reinvention. Just small, steady upgrades. 1 new skill. 1 new habit. 1 fear faced. Compounding is quiet at first, but powerful over time. Third, stay long enough for the compounding to work. Most people quit too early. They don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they leave before momentum builds. Success often arrives slowly, then suddenly. But only for those who stay. Nothing is impossible. But it is slow. It is lonely. It is uncomfortable. It asks you to start before you feel ready. It asks you to continue when applause is absent. It asks you to grow beyond the version of yourself that feels safe. And that's why it's worth it. Because when you outgrow what once scared you, you don't just gain success. You gain self-respect. If this story reminded you that growth matters more than comfort, like this video. If you want to improve your English while strengthening your mindset, subscribe to Inspire English Stories. And in the comments, write 1 simple sentence. 1 impossible thing I'm starting is _______. Keep it honest. Keep it small. And then begin.